So this is it, my last official day of working. Starting tomorrow, I will be retired. I'm working from home for my last day. Not a lot on my plate, but I decided to wear a suit today, even though I'm at home, because this has been my uniform the last 26 years of my life. Hardly a week has gone by where I didn't wear multiple suits during the week. So that's why I'm dressed up for this occasion, just to pay tribute to my history. I want to start by saying something I haven't shared with a lot of people, of course, my wife and a couple of other close people, but I'm scared of retirement. I am terrified of retirement. And I'll explain why here in a little bit, but I think it's important to understand a little bit about my work history and put things in perspective. I've been working since I was 12 years old. I seems like I've always had a job. My first real job was I worked at a bar called the Shady Rest on Highway 33 in Freehold, New Jersey, the road that went between Freehold and Asbury Park, a pretty busy road. But I would clean the bar on the weekends during school. And behind the bar was what we called a clam bake area, where they would hold barbecues in the summer. The Elks and the Policemen's Benevolent Society or the Masons, they would have their summer barbecues there. And it had a stage, a pavilion, kitchen, a beer station, all done in forest green and white. Every building, every picnic table was that color. And the reason I knew that was because we had to pay them, paint them every year. The owner of the bar was a Polish gentleman, and my friends who work with me there are chuckling right now, who lived up the hill from the bar. His name was Joe Lipsky, and for some reason, and I've asked all my friends, I have no idea why, my nickname was Whitey. I don't think it was a racial component or anything, although I was very pale-skinned as a child. I tend to believe it was because I always had a dirty face as a kid, but no one will ever know. None of my friends can remember why I was referred to as, hey, Whitey. Anyway, Joe lived up on the hill, and those of us on the weekends on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, we would be at his door, knocking on the door. He would come to the door, usually chewing his breakfast, closing his terry cloth robe, and say, hey, you guys head down there and grab the rakes and rake the parking lot. I'll be down there in a little bit. So we'd head down there, or if it was just me or a couple kids, depending on, it was not a set schedule, we'd go to the closet in the back and pull out the rakes, and we would rake the front. And I always prided myself on having perfectly straight lines. So I would walk with a rake, and then I would go up and walk again, and the lines were always straight. And then I would rake at the end and pick up the garbage that was left from the night before. This is where I learned to really hate people who smoked, because they would literally just dump their ashtrays out there, and it was like the rake never fully picked up all the cigarette butts. So you'd have to do that by hand. And then just about the time we would finish with that, Joe would come pulling into the parking lot. And I always had like this, I hated it because I had just finished raking the parking lot, and now there were tire tracks in it. We would follow Joe into the Shady Rest, and he'd unlock the door, and then he'd hand the keys to me and whoever and say, okay, go get the beer. And the beer was always Budweiser, long, tall boys, long necks. I don't know. And they were kept in a shed, and we'd have to go get the hand cart because you had to load the beer cabinet so the beer would be cold by the time the first customer came in. And I remember we'd get 4 or 5 cases on the hand cart and wheel them down and stack them in the cabinet behind the bar. And I remember I was putting the beer in, and it's funny how things stick with you. I was putting the beer in and just stacking them in there. And he said to me, hey, Whitey, turn all the labels out so they're facing. So it was Budweiser straight across. And he said, for a nickel more, you want to go first class. And that has stuck with me my whole life. Just do a little bit more and make it look good. And it doesn't require that much effort. So kudos to you, Joe, for teaching me something when I was 12 years old that I still remember at 65. The real memories came during the clam bake time. It was sometimes there would be a party on a Friday night, and then again on a Saturday, and then again on the Sunday during the summer. And I got to tell you, before the season even started, Joe would make us paint all the picnic tables and garbage cans and outbuildings white and green. I want to say it's forest green, but I think it's a little lighter than that. Oil-based paint, so whatever clothes I was going to wear, I was going to make a mess and ruin my clothes. And we would paint everything and get it ready, sweep everything, make sure the bathrooms were ready for the clam bakes. Now, if there was one on Friday night, we would get ready, make sure everything was ready, and then we would work it. Sometimes, bussing tables or getting things that are required for the cooks, whatever was on the menu. There was a stage, and oftentimes there was a band there. And I remember that if there was something on Friday night, and then on Saturday we would have to go in, and we would get up early and go in and sweep and rake and empty the garbage cans and get it ready for when people would start showing up by 10 or 11 o'clock, the people who were prepping for a 2 or 3 o'clock barbecue, the band coming in. And the way we would do it, the tables were in a line. They were just like regular picnic tables, but heavy. And there'd be like 10 in a line, both inside and outside. Inside you swept, outside you raked. And I never had upper body strength. So my friend Marty or T-Boo or Jimmy would flip the tables over. And while they would go to the next table to flip it over, and I would rake or sweep underneath it. And by the time we had moved down, they would be flipping them back. And it was a cardinal sin if they weren't perfectly lined up, which we took great pride in. Another memory of coming back to me with that, and I've talked to several of these kids now as adults, I don't remember goofing off or not working or kicking back. I think we always had the fear that Joe, although he didn't sit there and supervise us, he would walk back there occasionally, but I just don't remember it. I remember a couple other things. I remember that there was a station that had beer on tap. I want to say it was Schaefer or Budweiser. And next to it was another tap with root beer on it. And they'd have these big glass pitchers that you would go up to there and say, oh, I want the pitcher of beer. And they would fill it up and put a couple mugs on it and take it to the table. And I remember that those were always hooked up. And I don't ever remember drinking beer. I don't remember any of us drinking beer. I do remember us drinking root beer. Like that was a perk of the job, that we were allowed to drink the root beer. Although not explicitly given permission, we would go drink the root beer. The other thing I remember was during some of these things, and I am not a seafood connoisseur, so I'm not even sure what it was. Maybe cherry stones or whatever they were, but there was this giant of a man dressed in white, and he would have tape around his fingers, and he would reach into this ice-filled bucket and slice these clams or mussels or whatever they were, cherry stones or whatever. He would slice them open and put I remember the trays said Budweiser or Schaefer on them. They were metal tin trays. And people would walk up and go, oh, give me a half a dozen or give me a dozen. And he would cut them and place them on a tray and then put this red kind of sauce on them. I think that's the reason I never liked seafood, was because it just looked so disgusting to me. But working at Joe's was I think there's an argument between one of my friends and I. I remember getting paid $2 an hour. My friend says it was $1.50 an hour. I think I'm right. But about every 2 or 3 weeks, we would go to Joe and ask for our money. And Joe drove a brown Ford station wagon. And in the front seat, it was covered with racing forms from the horse track in Freehold, New Jersey. And you'd walk up to him and he'd get out of the car and we'd line up and he'd ask us how much. And he always had a wad of bills and just start counting them off and handing them to you. This is a little off topic, but still a story that sticks with me is I remember I had worked most of the summer because Sears and Roebuck, we had a Sears and Roebuck catalog, and they had a mini bike for $325. And I was so focused on getting that mini bike. It had, the pull handle to start it. It wasn't even the best one they had, but it was the one that I was working for. And unfortunately, that summer, my father left. He gave us no notice. He just didn't come home from work one night and kind of left my mother stranded. She didn't even know why he didn't come home until she called his boss, and he said that him and another woman had taken off. They'd emptied out their retirement fund and their vacation and everything, and that's how that ended. And my mother was left with the 3 kids at the time and a house payment and everything. And my mother was working at Brockway Glass. But I remember coming home after getting paid by Joe Lipsky, and I think I had like $400. I mean, it was a lot of money. Again, we're talking, what would this have been, early 70s. And my mom said to me, "Did you get paid by Joe?" And I'm like, "Yeah, today." And I showed her my wad of money. Next, going to ask her to go to Sears and Roebuck so I could get my mini bike. And my mom took the money from me and peeled off a $5 bill and said, "This is too much money for you to have," and took my entire paycheck virtually. And I remember being so upset, so pissed off that my mother would take that money. I worked hard for that money. But in life, as I've looked back on that, my mother really needed that money. And I'm glad I could help out back then. So working for Joe was hard work. I learned so much about doing a job, starting it and finishing it, whether it was painting tables or raking leaves, emptying garbage cans. If you're going to do it, you need to do it right. If you're going to put the effort into something, to do it right. And I never knew it, but I learned so much about that. I learned about work ethic, that if you said you were going to be there, that you would be there. Now, keep in mind, some of these weekends where there were 3 parties, it was not uncommon for us to put in 14-hour days. And again, I was 12, 13 years old. The other kids were a little older than me, but because I was so big, Joe didn't really have an idea how old Whitey was. I will add a couple things to this. I know my mom grew up in this neighborhood, and my mom knew Joe Lipsky. And Joe had been around forever, so it was not uncommon. Towards the end of summer, you would get tired of working at Joe Lipsky's, and he would come riding around the neighborhood looking for you. And I remember one time I ran home and got home just in time before Joe, I thought, and he pulled in the driveway in his Ford station wagon, and my mom yelled at me, "Bill, Joe wants you." And of course I had to go back to work. But my next job is, again, in the same neighborhood where I grew up. It was at an automotive repair place called GM Repairs. It didn't stand for General Motors. It was the name of the father who owned it, and he had a son who worked there. John was the father. He had served in Australia and during World War II in New Caledonia, and his wife was from New Caledonia. Hard man. Just towards a kid, he was a hard man. I remember him just as vividly with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, a non-filtered cigarette, with the smoke getting in his eyes while he was trying to line a wheel up or trying to take something off of a car. Always had this cigarette in his mouth. His son Charlie had just come back from the service, got drafted, and was somewhere in Southeast Asia. And Charlie was kind of like my hero. I mean, Charlie had served his country honorably, and he had an Oldsmobile 442, which was like the hottest car. It was a 442, stood for 4-barrel, 4-speed, and dual exhaust. And I thought that he was the coolest car, along with him and another guy who lived in the neighborhood, Johnny Johnson, who had an El Camino. And to me, those were my heroes, and I feel sorry for kids today that didn't have that, just to look at someone in awe and just aspire to be something like that. And they made me want to go in the military, the way they were revered by the other kids in the neighborhood. But anyway, I went to work for GM Repair, literally after school. It would close 2 hours after I got out of school. So in that time, I would clean up, straighten up, sweep. And then in the summer, I got to do more. They taught me how to do oil changes or services, and then even brake jobs. And then I learned more and more, and all mentored by Charlie Grega. Charlie was the one who gave me my love for old cars. And in future videos, I'll show you some of my old cars. All due to him teaching me. I remember a fond memory of a Chevrolet pickup came in that needed a valve job. And I remember it was pouring down raining, and I was sitting in the engine compartment taking the head off of the truck. And I remember I got the head off, and they sent it to a machine shop. And I knew it was coming back the next day, and I ran to work after school, and Charlie had already put the head on, and that was the only time I really did not like Charlie, because I wanted to do that so bad. But I learned so much. I really had and still have the love for cars. But I've been working that whole time, and I always remember work made me happy. And what really made me happy was a beginning and an ending to something, even around the house. I love a project. Okay, we're going to clean the garage and pull everything out of the garage and scrub the floor or sweep the floor, then put water down and scrub it, and then rinse it out, and then get all the cobwebs out, and then put everything back neatly. That's what I enjoy. People ask me, oh, what are your hobbies? Or what do you like to do? And I like to see projects come to an end and know that I was instrumental in doing that. Which brings me back to the beginning of this video of me being scared and, I said, terrified of retirement. I'm not good at doing nothing. I have plans to do stuff, but I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with my ego, that I knew so much in my job, and now I don't know it. I didn't have this problem when I retired from the military because I was going to another job. I had a job 3 months before I got out of the Army, but anyway, I'm trying to do these videos for me for being therapeutic to just get it out there how I feel. And learn how that I have to make adjustments that, okay, the Bible says there is a season for everything, and one season ended and another season is starting. But one that I probably could have done a better job preparing for. And it's not, other people have to worry about different issues about retiring. But for me, it's just the fact of the unknown and what I'm getting into. So I've kind of told you that I'm planning a trip where I'm going to try to go see some of the Western United States. My wife has been wonderful. Kelly has been really great in telling me I need to probably just go alone. And I am. I'll probably leave next Wednesday. And I hope to do some videos about that journey as well. I like working. I still love working. And the answer, or the question you may be asking yourself is, well, why don't you get another job? Or why did you retire? And I need to retire. I mean, while I enjoy working, at some point, I don't want to be on my deathbed saying, boy, I wish I would have worked more. I plan on spending more time with my kids and my grandchildren and my friends. And traveling. It's just going to be a hard transition for me. So if you made it through this video, kudos to you. There'll be other videos. But for now, that's it. It's been a good run. It's going to be hard tomorrow to say I'm unemployed. But I will do the best that I can at it. I mean, I'll wrap up with this, that I have been truly blessed the last 20 years of my life working for a company and using my skills to help people with the disease, help physicians with the disease diabetes, and helping them let patients live a better life. And I have tons and tons of stories of what our products have done and the way that I help make those products easier to use and to help physicians. And I used to tell people when I would walk out of an office, I could always tell if I did a good job because the staff hugged me because I had made their life easier and help their patients. So look forward to the upcoming videos, and thanks for taking the time to watch this one. More to come, and I hope to get better at this. Thanks.